Moroni seems to know whatever Joseph Smith has done and thought and said and where he's been and who he's been with. And Joseph knows that he's got to account for all these things. So imagine that, 17, 18, 19, 20, and you're telling a messenger sent from God's presence regularly how you're doing.
On September 21st and 22nd, 2023, it will be 200 years since the coming of the angel Moroni to Joseph Smith in Palmyra, New York. The significance of that date and of the events that transpired is the subject of this special History of the Saints presentation. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
September 21st, 1823, is the beginning of the renewal of the broken covenant. The new and everlasting covenant is broken, and Joseph Smith is called on that day to begin the work of restoring it. The Book of Mormon, internally, thinks of itself as the signifier of that covenant. When the Book of Mormon comes off the press, that's your evidence that the covenant has been renewed. And the work of God of gathering his covenant people and bringing them back to his presence is underway. Well, Joseph Smith is called to launch that, to get that book out of the hill where it's lain for a long, long time, and to launch the restoration. September 21st, 1823 is the launch of the restoration.
In 1823, Joseph was 17 years old.
Who is this 17-year-old boy quickly becoming a man? Well, he is pious. We might not associate that with Joseph Smith, but this is a young man who is, anytime he writes for himself throughout his life, he inclines to prayer. He dumps himself out before his Heavenly Father. He seeks God by default. He yearns for and seeks and finds God. To be Joseph Smith is to be tough. It's to be really resilient, spiritually resilient, to be reverent, right? To have a deep sacred sense, but also to be native cheery, right? Jovial. And so he's going to have some guilt and some conflict in his personality just because of the sort of the conflicting strands of who he is. I'm convinced that God picks him because of all those things, right? These are strong shoulders, and I mean physically strong. This is a guy who could wrap 40 or 50 pounds of gold in his smock and run through the woods with it and knock down people on the way if he needed to. And a guy who can go to his knees and plead with the Lord, and with such faith that the heavens are rent and God himself appears. This is a young man who's got physical and spiritual strength and depth, even at a pretty young age. He's not fully mature, but he is well on his way to becoming the Lord's seer.
In June 1820, the Smith family bought this farm as virgin land south of Palmyra Village.
June of 1820, they signed the agreement to buy it. Yeah, but so they're already there. They're already living on it. There's the Smith family knows that this is going to be family that the land that they'll occupy. Joseph mentions, he goes to get his father's axe in a clearing for the first vision. So they're already beginning to clear a portion of the land, but the actual transaction doesn't take place until June of 1820.
And if you've ever been to the Smith farm in Palmyra and Manchester, New York, then you've been to the Smith log home, and the reconstruction is built exactly right on the original foundations of that home. And we have descriptions of the home being 2-story or 1.5-story, having a garret. And so the reconstruction there with the boys' room and the girls' room upstairs fits very well with all the documents. If you've been there, you remember the girls' room is in the back, which with a wall there that gives them more privacy. It's smaller because there's 2 girls and there's a whole bunch of boys. That room probably didn't have a high ceiling, and of course it's the slanted slopes of the roof there. And so when Joseph Smith said Moroni was standing at my bedside, or standing before me, or standing between the floors of the room, Moroni must have been standing like right in the middle of the room, under the central ridge of the house there.
And Joseph during that time was heavily involved in work, but he also was involved in social activities. A young woman that was an acquaintance of his, she later said that she had danced with him at a dance, and a lot of the youth would go to these dances, particularly in the fall, when they would husk corn or do other kinds of bees, they called them, activities where they worked together. And they would dance and do other things, and Joseph had danced at this dance, and he was beginning to feel that maybe he was a little too frivolous. We don't know all the details of what he did, but he said it wasn't serious. That wasn't part of his inclination to commit serious sin, but that he wasn't acting in the way that a young man of his station should act. Perhaps this dance that he went to was part of that. Perhaps he'd gone to these corn husking bees. It was Sunday of September 21st, 1823, and that day he mentioned later that he did not attend the various churches because he'd been commanded to not associate with them. So in my mind, he stayed home that day, but Sunday is a good day to ponder the things of God, and he had done so. His family then went to bed. And Oliver Cowdery says that the rest of the family had long since fallen asleep. The noises of getting ready to bed and the involvement in preparing for that had settled down for some time, and that Joseph supposed it was 11 or 12 o'clock at night, or maybe even a little later, that he was still wide awake, pondering his situation, pondering his relationship with God, the sins that he'd committed, and he was praying in his mind as he was there in bed, seeking further direction. And as he was praying, a light appeared. You can imagine pitch black circumstances with nothing around for miles, no light around for miles. The light could be immediately blinding, but it continued to get brighter and brighter until it was as bright as noonday. And he said that a personage appeared to him. That personage was Moroni. Moroni called him by name and began to talk to him. He started by talking to Joseph about the gathering of Israel, and that would begin with him, that Israel would be gathered. And he unfolded other scripture. He cited other scriptures to him and interpreted them so that Joseph would understand those details as well.
And he starts by saying, "Listen to me. I'm a messenger sent from the presence of God to you, and I have something important for you to know. Your work to which you are called means God will send you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet before the Lord's second coming. And he's going to turn the ancestors and the descendants toward each other. If that doesn't happen, the earth will be utterly wasted at the Lord's coming. When Moroni comes 3 times one night and again the next day and says the same stuff over and over, it must have this germane to Joseph's mission. It's something fundamental to his calling. So, in other words, Moroni is telling Joseph Smith, I know you're 17 and all you were doing was praying for forgiveness, but I'm here to call you to the work, and the work is to save the world.
Now, Moroni, according to Oliver Cowdery, was about the height of a common man. He was taller than Oliver, of course, but Joseph Smith Sr. said he was about 5'10" in height. Several individuals, including Joseph's father, said that he had a beard, and they all agreed that he was stout. What does stout mean? That's they didn't define that. But so here was this stout angel with a beard, about 5'10" in height, who gave Joseph the instructions.
And of course, the messenger told Joseph of the record buried in this hill.
Oliver Cowdery says that Joseph had visited the location before he knew the hill, and you can imagine that many young people in the area had visited that location because it was the tallest hill in the whole setting, and it was easy to see the surrounding countryside for miles from that location. So it was a spot that others had visited as well. Moroni then talked to him for a considerable amount of time and then gathered up the light around him and disappeared. He returned again and then began to rehearse the same things to Joseph and told him more. And then he disappeared again and then came back a third time that night. Joseph had told Oliver Cowdery that it was about 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night when Moroni first appeared. That the end of the third time that he talked to Joseph, Joseph says shortly after that the rooster in their yard began to crow, marking morning, and everybody started getting up to begin working for the day. That would have happened at about 5:30 in the morning. So about 6 hours of time, Moroni continued to rehearse these things to Joseph. So at least one of those times was at least 2 hours in length because they got longer. We don't have most of what Moroni told Joseph, and Joseph even told us that he told him many more scriptures and cited many more scriptures and interpreted them, but he wasn't able to explain those to us at this time. So we got up in the morning after hearing Moroni rehearse these things 3 times. Monday morning, start of a new week. Everybody's anxious to go out and work hard. And what the family opted to do that morning, at least the men of the family, were going to go and harvest grain. I don't know if you've ever been to that section of New York, September 21st, September 22nd. But the times I've been there, it's either the trees are just beginning to turn red or there's a brilliant red forest all around you. The beeches would start to turn brown, the maples turning bright red. This was the setting that they were in. They knew that fall was upon them, and there was a sense of urgency, haste. We've got to work hard to get our work done. The family was very skilled at harvesting wheat. So the family goes out to where they're harvesting their wheat. Alvin is apparently the gang leader. There's one man's in charge of kind of leading. He'll set the pace and everybody needs to follow along. Joseph is beside him, which suggests that he's a pretty good worker as well. But Alvin notices that he's not up to par.
Father Smith suggested to Joseph that he go home and let his mother take care of him.
Joseph's climbing over the fence of that apple orchard to get to the house, and as he's climbing over, he falls back beneath an apple tree, where he's not able to get up, and immediately Moroni, the angel, appears to him again and begins to tell him the same things he's told him before. So this is going to take some time, more than an hour of his time. He rehearses all these details again. And he asks Joseph why he didn't tell his father, which is when Joseph says, I was afraid he wouldn't believe me. And he tells Joseph to go tell your father and he'll believe every word that you tell him.
And Joseph set out for the hill with thoughts of treasure filling his mind.
Let me explain something real quick about treasure-seeking culture. So in treasure-seeking culture, there are several ideas about, who made these treasures, who buried these treasures, and even like ideas and beliefs about treasures being protected or guarded, sometimes by a spirit of the person who had the treasure and buried it.
And Oliver, Joseph's mom, they all give us this sense of the story that by the time Joseph arrives at the hill, he's completely gone another direction than what the angel had warned him about. So he levers up the stone covering the box. He reaches in to grab the plates, and he cannot pull them out.
On attempting to take possession of the record, a shock was produced upon his system by an invisible power, which deprived him in measure of his natural strength. He desisted for an instant and then made another attempt, but was more sensibly shocked than before. What was the occasion of this he knew not. There was the pure, unsullied record, as had been described. He had heard of the power of enchantment and 1,000 like stories which held the hidden treasures of the earth, and supposed that physical exertion and personal strength was only necessary to enable him to yet obtain the object of his wish. He therefore made the third attempt with an increased exertion, when his strength failed him more than at either of the former times, and without premeditating he exclaimed, "Why can I not obtain this book?" "Because you have not kept the commandments of the Lord," answered a voice within a seeming short distance. He looked, and to his astonishment, there stood the angel who had previously given him the directions concerning this matter. In that part where Oliver Cowdery writes, he meaning Joseph Smith, he had heard of the power of enchantment and 1,000 like stories which held the hidden treasures of the earth. That's Oliver Cowdery talking about treasure stories, treasure tales. Joseph Smith had heard some of these and was familiar with some of these concepts. So when he reaches down to get the plates and he can't get them out of the stone box, he's like thinking, why can't I get these out of the stone box? And it's at this point where he starts thinking about all these stories about treasure, and it's sometime being enchanted so that you can't get it.
And Moroni reiterates, you son, you're never going to get that record until you get through your head what it is and who it's for. It's not for you. It's not for treasure. It's not one of your buried treasures guarded by a clever spirit. I am an angel sent from the presence of God. And he reiterates and rehearses then these same ancient promises and prophecies, and he contextualizes for Joseph what the Book of Mormon is. But give Joseph time, right? Let's give him time, just like the Lord did, to grow into this understanding.
Joseph then is not allowed to take the plates. He's told that it's not just a matter of wanting to live the commandments, but he has to be able to live the commandments. But he's not at that stage yet. He has this desire to be good, but that he needs to gain the ability to be good.
The Lord sends Moroni to reach Joseph right where he's at. He doesn't come and condemn him. He doesn't say, Joseph, you have the dumbest ideas I've ever heard. Now, come on, get over it. Moroni says, okay, I understand that you're thinking of these things in this way. My job is to get you away from the wrong elements of your treasure-seeking culture, but to harness the gift of seeing and to cultivate that gift and to prepare you to use that gift and power of God to bring forth the marvelous work. So Moroni's job is to mentor Joseph Smith, to train him, to teach him what his spiritual gift is all about and why God gave it to him in the first place. And that's going to take several years to do. But in the first few days, Joseph learns a lot. Okay, so I think we've established that originally, when Joseph first hears Moroni announce the buried gold plates, there's no way for him to make sense of that other than in the context of his time, meaning a treasure-seeking subculture. Now, over time, Moroni is going to help him grow out of that, but at the time, that's the context.
And that is what we hope for by this special documentary presentation, to present the events of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, the latest research in its historical context. And of course, we will follow up with further presentations as those bicentennial events unfold. For now, this is Glenn Rawson, and thank you for being with us.